The sun blazed down as I stared at my dried-up irrigation ditch, heart pounding harder than a jackhammer. My well had never run dry before, not even in the worst droughts, yet my crops were wilting, and my cattle stood around their empty troughs, confused. Something wasn't right. At first, I thought it was the heat. But as the days passed and the water flow dwindled, I had a sinking feeling someone was stealing my water. It didn't take long to find my suspect, Karen Whitman, my delightful neighbor, a woman who had made my life miserable from the day she moved in. She complained about the farm's smell, the unsightly barn, and the unbearable sound of my rooster. Recently, she had turned her backyard into a paradise straight out of a luxury home magazine, complete with a massive koi pond, a three-tiered fountain, and a lush green lawn during a drought. My well was drying up while Karen's backyard flourished. I needed proof. Before dawn, I followed my water line through the fields and past my barn, where I found something that made my blood boil, a freshly installed PVC pipe running straight from my well to Karen's backyard, hidden under decorative rocks and mulch. The audacity. That afternoon, I paid her a visit. She answered the door in a flowery blouse, holding an iced tea, her expression as sugary sweet as her voice. "Oh, Jake. What a surprise. What brings you here?" I leaned against her doorframe, glancing over her shoulder at the towering fountain behind her. "Just wondering if you've noticed anything odd with the water lately." She hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Water? No, everything's been normal." I smirked. "Funny. My well's been running low. But your yard looks like a resort. Any idea why?" Karen laughed, waving a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't be silly. We're just good at conserving water." I studied her for a moment, then grinned. "Guess I'll have to call the county to investigate." That wiped the smile right off her face. That night, under the cover of darkness, I shut off her little water heist. With a few turns of the wrench, I sealed the stolen pipeline tight. No more fountains, koi ponds, or lush lawns. For good measure, I installed a small security camera to catch any funny business. The next morning, Karen's shriek of horror echoed across the neighborhood. I sat on my porch, sipping coffee, watching her storm around her backyard, kicking at her dead fountain and useless sprinkler system. Minutes later, she marched up my driveway, her designer sandals kicking up dust. "Jake, something's wrong with my water. My fountain isn't working. My koi fish need water. My plants are dying." I took a slow sip of coffee. "Sounds rough. Maybe call a plumber." She gaped. "A plumber? That'll cost a fortune." I smiled. "Yeah, probably." By noon, a plumber arrived, and I watched from my porch as Karen desperately explained her mystery water problem. When the plumber informed her that her property had no connection to the city water line, her shriek carried across the fields. Then came the moment I was waiting for. Her panicked gaze flicked toward my farm. Minutes later, she was stomping back up my driveway, red-faced and fuming. "Jake, did you do something to my water?" I raised an eyebrow. "Me? Why would I do that?" She huffed. "Because my water was working yesterday, and now it's not." "What are the chances?" I shrugged. "Well, considering how much water you were using, maybe you just ran out." Her jaw clenched. "Be serious. My koi fish are suffocating, my plants are dying. And do you have any idea how much my property value will drop if my lawn turns brown?" I took another sip of coffee. "Sounds like a problem." She glared. "Fix it." I leaned forward. "Karen, I hate to break it to you, but you don't have a legal water connection because you were stealing mine." Her eyes widened. "That is a ridiculous accusation." I pulled out my phone and played security footage of the illegal pipe running from my well to her backyard. Karen's face drained of color. You can't prove I did that." I smirked. "Doesn't matter. Your property, your responsibility." Her shoulders slumped, but then she straightened, forcing a chuckle. "Okay, look, maybe this was all a misunderstanding. I'm sure we can work something out." I folded my arms. "Oh, we're definitely working something out." Karen tried to bribe me. "How much to make this go away?" I tapped my chin. "Well, I lost weeks of irrigation, my crops suffered, my animals suffered. Let's say $5,000. Her eyes nearly popped out. "That's insane." I shrugged. "So is stealing water." Realizing she had no choice, she begrudgingly paid up. But her troubles weren't over. When she tried to paint herself as the victim, the HOA caught wind of her antics. Not only did she get slapped with a hefty fine, but the entire neighborhood learned of her water theft. Her once respected reputation crumbled overnight. Neighbors whispered as she walked by. Some openly laughed at her. Even the HOA passed a new regulation preventing any homeowner from installing underground piping without official approval, effectively making sure Karen never pulled this stunt again. Karen tried to salvage her home, hauling gallons of store-bought water to keep her dying plants alive. But nothing worked. Her once lush lawn turned into a dried-up patch of dirt. Her koi pond, once the centerpiece of her yard, became a muddy hole. Finally, she snapped. The for sale sign went up, but buyers weren't exactly lining up to pay top dollar for a house with a dead lawn and a ruined reputation. The only offers came from local farmers, including me. Weeks later, I stood in her backyard, the same backyard that had once stolen from me, holding the keys to my new property. Karen had spent months trying to ruin my farm. In the end, she had paid me thousands just to leave town. As I turned on the hose, letting water flow freely onto the ground, I smiled, knowing that for once, it was exactly where it was supposed to be. The war was over, and I had won.